that curiosity to lean in and to do something different. It's exactly what you were saying, Johan. I think it's all that sense of control. And there is a thing that we need to pay attention to on our dashboard, that lordship. We might love God in concepts, but are we letting him to be the Lord of our life? Are we releasing that control? Not my will, but yours. Even Jesus prayed that prayer.
This is Journey with Care, a podcast by CareImpact, where curious Canadians find inspiration to love others well through real-life stories and honest conversations. All right, we are in another Second Thoughts episode. We are coming off our episode with Emily, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce her last name again. Demetrio. Although, to be fair, she said, I'm not even sure if that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. So she doesn't know how to pronounce her own name. So she did have a lot of good insights, even if she didn't have insight into her own name.
Yeah, well, would you know how to say your authentic family name in the origin language, I wonder?
Well, I looked up my last name a little bit, and
Try me.
I've turned plural. I've come to find out it's supposed to be Heinrich.
It's supposed to be a Heinrich.
I've had lots of weird people pronounce it Heinrichs. That one drives me crazy because I don't smell. In fact, my wife says I never smell. So that doesn't really match my name. But you know, throughout time and history, people say, I'm going to go to the Heinrich house. It doesn't sound as good. So let's say Heinrichs because it's plural. And I think that's probably where it came from.
Well, my origin name for park, because I'm married to a park, my married name is Puck, but people can't say Puck. And so there's a silent R in there. So everybody says park. So
you should have named one of your kids Hockey Puck.
I was going to call him a Assiniboine or St. Vital Puck.
Anyway, we are getting off topic.
We digress.
So we are talking about our episode, The Courage to Stay, How to Be Present in the Midst of Suffering. Emily shared some stories and insights that she had, some people that she met. So what has sat with you since having that conversation with Emily, Wendi?
Yeah, I really enjoyed having that conversation with Emily. And as you get to know Emily, like I've been able to do over these last couple of years, there's such genuine heart behind what she's saying. She's not coming into this saying, look at me, I'm caring for the community. She genuinely carries that calling, that heart, that inclination, almost that magnetic force into the community. She just can't help herself. And so that is inspiring to see people like that. It makes me think, Johan, why is it that some people are gravitationally just that Jesus heart towards community and to other people that people might otherwise marginalize or walk away from in fear, and what makes other people hesitate, almost the opposite magnetic reaction to caring for community? What makes people incline to it and what makes people repel?
Well, that was one of the questions I had when Emily was speaking, because she said, you have to want to care. And my question was, okay, how do you get to want to care? How do you get to that point? How do you cross that chasm from being indifferent, which this whole series is about? We're in the Cost of Indifference series. How do you get from being indifferent to wanting to care, to not wanting to be indifferent?
Well, I think it could be different for different people, different personalities, introverts, extroverts. I can only speak from my own experience and from what I've seen is that when I have been radically cared for by others and I've allowed other people to care for me, it changes my outlook on others as well. It takes out that hesitation, but I have to be willing to be receiving care. And for myself, it was going overseas, living in Central and South America, doing my school, and I was doing some church planting, community development stuff. But I was there to support, but I was there to learn, and I needed help from my community. I needed my village. And so when I come back now, for me, that was a shift for me. I was more like, otherwise not outward looking. But now when I see newcomers here in Canada and students, I was that foreign student in another land. I was that person speaking a different language and fumbling around. And there's a different compassion that I can't make up because you can identify. And granted, all our stories are different. I can't identify with people going through homelessness or mental health, but I have been vulnerable myself and I have needed help. And so I feel like for me, that has been a shift that continues to challenge me, that I need to continue to receive help as much as be there for others, to be human with others. For me, what has helped you be more present with others?
Well, I almost want to take it back to episode 3 we had with Troy, where we really talked about that curiosity factor. Now, I shared this in the introduction of Emily's episode, but just to bring it back, this was a long time ago when I was in a previous church. They had an inner city prayer room where we do worship and feed the poor and the homeless that would come in as well. So I was going in there to lead worship, to do my thing and serve that way. But there was still a disconnect with those that were in the room.
Hmm.
So after going there for long enough time, I think the curiosity got to me. It's like, you know what, this is actually boring just to serve in this way and not actually connect with anyone. So I began sitting at the tables with them and asking what their stories are because I was getting bored. And I think that curiosity, if you're curious enough, everybody has a story and they have a story to tell. And quite often it's interesting and it'll blow you away if you actually dig deep. So again, going back to episode 3, it's that curiosity. I don't know, sometimes I think we need to allow ourselves to get bored so that we can
Yeah.
get curious again.
And we have to ask ourselves, this is an internal thing that each one of us has to do some reflection, or maybe in a small group of people we trust, is what is killing my curiosity? What is stopping me from being curious? So if I'm not curious, that should be an alarm on our dashboard. Why am I curious about other people? Not in a nosy kind of way. We're not talking about that, but that inclination, that magnetic inclination towards other. Because if God has really is who he says he is and has created us who he says we are, created in the image of God for community, in relationship with others, and created for community, why aren't we curious about others? Why aren't we magnetically leaning in? What is that interference, that barrier that's preventing us from naturally being drawn into the lives of others that is mutually flourishing? I think if we looked closely, fear would be one of the top things in a lot of people's list, and it might look different for different people. But if we are held back by fear, that is something that we can work on, that God can work on if we let him. Like perfect love casts out all fear. God is love. So what is it internally that I need to do some checks on so that I have a natural, not a contrived, I should do this. I should help the homeless because that's what a good Christian should do. People can suss you out. Oh my goodness. They smell the fear, right? But what can we do to address those curiosity killers?
Yeah, I think it's getting out of our comfort zones again. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live a boring life that's just sheltered and living in fear and not letting others in, because we were made for so much more than that.
Hmm.
And like, that's why we're podcasting. We love stories and we think stories are transformational. When you hear them, you get to understand other perspectives. It makes you think. And I think when we shelter ourselves from that, we're just going to die inside. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think we know the right answer is that we don't want a boring life, that we look to the person that's living the life of adventure, that is brave, that is taking the stage, that is taking a stand, that is doing the brave thing. And we look at them like, wow, that's so great. I want to do that. But in actuality, in praxis, we're taking the cheap seats. We don't actually want to. We aspire to do something. It's wishful thinking, but are we taking the steps to do it? And we think, oh, that chasm from here to there to be like Emily, I could never be like her. And good on you. We should all be ourselves. But that curiosity to lean in and to do something different, it's exactly what you were saying, Johan. I think it's all that sense of control. And there is a thing that we need to pay attention to on our dashboard, that lordship. We might love God in concept, but are we letting him to be the Lord of our life? Are we releasing that control? Not my will, but yours. Even Jesus prayed that prayer. Can we truly abandon our sense of control and sovereignty of our own life to say, Lord, I trust you that you want what's good for my life. You want what's good for that person's life. You are in this, and I'm going to trust you. And that's when we see growth. That's when we become alive. And that's why it's better to give than to receive. That's why when we serve people a glass of water, or visit them in prison, we meet Jesus in those times. So it's not about philanthropy. It's in those moments we experience God. But we often take the cheap seats and sing hallelujah from the cheap seats rather than getting into the real game. And that's where the adventure begins.
And if we're not growing, we are actually taking steps back. There's no being stagnant in this. You can't just
Right.
sit still. And that's kind of been a motto of mine. Like, am I growing in any areas? And if I'm not, I'm probably losing ground than gaining ground.
Yeah.
I think about looking at a tree that's been cut in half. And as someone that's curious, I'll look at those rings, and some of them are a lot bigger than others, and some look darker. And then like, wonder what happened that year.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, there's a lot of growth in this year, and the next year there's hardly any, but it's still growing. And eventually that tree stopped growing and it got cut down. So it's like you got to go through those hard years, and there's going to be good years, but as long as you're taking those steps forward, you're not going to get cut down.
Yeah, taking those risks. I think we need to celebrate risk taking, and that not everything has to be a happy ever ending, has to have this salvation story, or has to have we baptized Wayne type of story. It ended in a tragedy. However, there's a piece there that just smells like heaven, right? Not to glorify tragedy, but God enters into those moments still. And I think also another curiosity killer would be that comparison. Well, that person is doing it like this, or this person is doing that. And we stagnate ourselves by comparison. And each one of us has been uniquely created by God's image. And what is daring for you, Johan, to put yourself out there might look different than it is for me. But I can testify that in my life, it's those times that God has interrupted me with people that I naturally wouldn't sit and have coffee with, that haven't like dissuaded me from the faith, even though they aren't people of faith or have a very different lifestyle than mine. But it's actually challenged my theology. It's challenged my thinking. And I would say it's helping me refine who I am and become more secure in Christ, that in those moments I can trust God. I can give an example. Many years ago, I was downtown Winnipeg in Osborne Village, and I was sitting at a bus stop just waiting for a bus to come through. And there was many buses coming by, and out of one bus came a big crowd of people. I wasn't paying attention or anything. But then I was approached by one young gentleman and saying, "Excuse me, can I talk to you?" And I looked up and I'm like, okay, sure. I don't know who you are, but he introduced himself. He's like, "I got off the bus and I saw a light. You were filled with light, and I need to know why." And so I said, "Well, why don't we have coffee?" And he happened to be a white witch. And I'm like, I'm a prairie girl, Mennonite raised, bubble wrapped as it comes. I didn't know the first thing about white witches, but we had this great encounter. I learned about him. He learned about me. We had this exchange that I believe is God-cidental. It's actually helped give me more empathy and more compassion and more strategic prayer for people living and worshiping in the occult in a way that otherwise I would have just said, he's bad. I could stay away from him, to let's have a conversation. And it's helped me. I believe God used that. I didn't convert him. I didn't convince him about Jesus, but he saw the light of Christ within me. And it wasn't because I was like polishing my halo there either. But I needed that to say, you know what? This person is made in the image of God. And there's a yearning for light. And it's given me more compassion to not be so judgmental, to withhold my judgment that each person is on a journey. Have you had any experiences that you were pushed out of your comfort zone and yet God used that very encounter, that person to minister to you?
I can't think of any examples right now. I'm sure, like, I know there probably are, but your story reminds me, this is kind of a sidebar, but I heard a guy speaking one time and he would minister to those marginalized, those in the occult actually that the church wouldn't touch. And they'd have like these big club gatherings where they're clubbing, doing drugs and all this other things. So he decided, you know what, I'm gonna go right into these neighborhoods and I'm gonna do a rave. I'm gonna create a club. And he called it Club Satan.
Wow.
But it brought all these people in, and right in the middle of this rave and this club, they actually had a representation, some sort of statue of Satan, and they had clubs where people can literally club Satan, and they're playing.
Oh, I didn't know where this was going.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I thought it was hilarious, and he preached the gospel, of course, and people were getting saved. So,
Wow.
just kind of a play on words to get people
Yeah.
in the door, right?
I didn't do that, but
No.
but I think the point is proximity matters.
Yeah.
And people like we shouldn't beat ourselves up for not like naturally being inclined to be with people that don't look like us, talk like us, think like us. That's a natural inclination. So I think people can rid themselves of that shame. We're just naturally predisposed to do that. However, proximity does matter as we see the human in other people and understand our own humanness, that we haven't arrived yet, right? We have Jesus, he's arrived, but we're still on this journey. But as we get in human to human and we see the humanity in each other and the imago Dei, the image bearing properties of each other in each other, it's really hard to hate somebody when we're breaking bread together. It's really hard to say like inflammatory words like what goes on in social media when we're willing to mutually sit down together and spend time together and listen. Listening is such a gift. It doesn't mean we have to correct them, and we're not going to get cooties for them letting words out of their mouth that doesn't resonate with me. That's not who I am. It's an insecurity issue if we feel like we can't be in proximity. We might have to even think of our theology. Do we think God is that weak that when we're in the presence of others that look different than us, think different than us, have different beliefs and values, that our God isn't strong enough to hold us in those spaces? We need to check how big our God really is.
And getting dirty, I think that's, again, there's a fear thing there. And I don't know about you, but I've actually heard some people use the reference in scripture where it says, the poor you will always have among you. They'll use that as an excuse not to actually help the poor, not to get their hands dirty, saying,
Yeah.
well, the poor are always going to be there. So it's like, let's bring it into context again. This is Jesus. He's getting the perfume poured out on his feet, and his disciples are complaining, saying, oh, you could have given money to the poor instead of wasting all that. But Jesus was actually quoting something in Deuteronomy where it says, the poor you will always have with you in the land. Therefore, I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy and to the poor in your land. So it's like,
Yes.
but even in Jesus's context, I think he's actually speaking to the opposite of what people are using that as an excuse for, because it's the generosity piece. It's the pouring out of your wealth, and it's the action of doing something.
Yeah, we could look at the flip side and say you will always have opportunity to find Jesus. You will always have opportunity to share the love of Jesus and give the hope for glory all around you. It'll never run dry. If we could just flip that. I love the way you're looking at it, Johan.
He's advocating for generosity. It's like, no, this one's been generous with me by pouring out the perfume on my feet. And then Jesus goes in another passage and he says, when I was sick and in prison, when I When I was
Yeah.
hungry, you fed me. So it's like when you're doing these things unto Jesus, when you're pouring out that expensive perfume,
Yeah.
when you are feeding the needy, when you are visiting those in prison, you are doing it unto Jesus. You're pouring out that perfume on his feet.
And not like a checklist. Oh, we should do these things so we can, that is our passageway to heaven. That is our passageway to be closer to Jesus. This is just a natural thing. This is who we are. This is the DNA of the church. But the church is so much more than charity and philanthropy and just giving and doing. It's about being in solidarity with other people, walking alongside, not above other people, to be with them in solidarity. We are always invited in solidarity with Christ in these places. These are sacred places. And I think, Johan, different people will be inclined, will see things in different ways, will catch their attention. I believe that there's something very important here. If somebody's always saying, Pastor, we got to do something about homelessness, chances are they might be called to that because they're having eyes to see, or their eyes are being open to that. Or we got to do something about children and domestic violence. Well, chances are you're being invited, whether that's in a direct response of inviting people into your home or in a professional way, or just philanthropy to support those who are professionally supporting these areas. Pay attention to the things that irk us, because those might be the places that invite us to be present in a radical way.
I want to take it a step further. I believe this is actually what the culture of the church is meant to be. Like, we shouldn't even have to go to our pastors and say, I think we need to do something about the poor.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, if you look in Acts, we've talked about this in our Neighbor Up series, which our small group series, which, if our listeners are interested in that, we developed
I'm so excited about
a
that,
small group
Johan.
course. We're still developing it. Check it out, Neighbor Up. You can go to CareImpact.ca to get some details or message us. But anyway, we talk about it in Acts where God's grace was so powerfully at work that there were no needy persons among them.
Yeah.
So, like, they were giving money and they were putting their houses up for sale. And it was just a cultural church thing where there were no needy among them, because this is what the church was meant to be.
Well, and you're pushing on a big button there right now, a flashing button in our nation of individualism. And that will rub us the wrong way when it sounds cute. And it sounds right. It is right. I agree with you, Johan. But what you're pressing there is a button of individual. I have my boundaries. I have my things. If people would only work harder, I've deserved this. Or I need to not, I have to be careful on my own battery reserve, like how much energy I have. And some of that is true. And that's why it's so easy to press that button. But you're talking about a whole nother button that's a little bit more sacrificial. It's not the big individualistic button. It's community button. And it's a lot easier said than done. But it sure is beautiful and tastes like heaven when we go there.
I think that's a good place to stop. But before we do you have a challenge for the listeners this week?
Well, in addition to what Emily challenged us with is, I would say, do some self-reflection. Reflect on the things that irk you in society, the things around you. Reflect on also the things that you notice that you might elbow your partner or your friends or your church, and they might not even have paid attention to it the same way. Pay attention to the things in the news that grab your attention, not just in the things that satiated, like that we just get kind of sensationalized and sucked into, but those little pieces, those curiosity. What makes you curious? Pay attention to that and allow God to be the Lord over that and say, God, what do I need to know? I can guarantee you he will show you. He's longing for you to draw near to him through people around you. And your adventure is just so close, closer than you think. But we have to dare to trust God with those things. So pay attention to those things and submit them to Christ and say, God, what do you want with this? And let me know what he tells you. I've heard some wild things, and God has never let us down.
That's great. Now it's time for
Care Lingo.
All right, Wendi, Care Lingo this week. This is a suitable one for today. Radical hospitality. Now we're going to flip the tables a little bit here, do something a bit different, and I'm going to get you to give me a wrong definition.
Okay. Okay. Radical hospitality. First thing that comes to mind is something that's totally rad. They're in their 80s outfits. They're tie-dye and they've got a big ghetto blaster on their shoulder. And when I ring the doorbell, they come up and they have music blasting and a bandana around their hair. They've got a mullet. Okay, I'm basically describing the next current generation. We're going back there, right? But they're totally radical. They say, yo, come on in, dude. Come into my house.
So the Ninja Turtles being hospitality
Yeah.
oriented sort of thing.
Yeah, the Ninja Turtles.
It's not just, giving away your Netflix account to someone else, being extra hospitable.
Well, I do that. Is that bad?
Oh, don't say it out loud. They might find you.
Oh, the things we've done in radical hospitality, things go wild. I give Wi-Fi passwords so the kids off the street who are running from gangs have a safe place. I've done that. True story.
You just got to put some benches outside your door so they have a place to sit.
That's how we keep them safe and they find home.
Some great examples of radical hospitality from Wendi, because radical hospitality goes beyond politeness. It's that open-handedness, the open-handed way of living that makes people feel like they belong. It's not just about inviting people in. It's about putting benches outside your door and giving Wi-Fi. It's creating those spaces where they feel like they're seen and valued. So I'm not sure if you have your windows closed when they're sitting outside, but make sure they're seen and valued, Wendi. That's real hospitality there. All right, so there's radical hospitality. Until next time, remember to stay curious, because that's what's going to fight our cynicism. That's what's going to keep us growing. Thank you for joining us on Journey with Care. To get more information on weekly episodes, upcoming opportunities, or to connect with our community, visit journeywithcare.ca or find CareImpact on Facebook and Instagram. Or just check the show notes for these links and all the links related to this episode. Share your thoughts, leave us a message, and be part of a network of individuals journeying in faith and purpose. Together, let's discover how we can make a meaningful impact.